topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in again today. I'm Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business TV and Radio on W4CY.com. We are streaming live on Talk4TV.com. That's the number 4. In addition to Facebook at Winning Business Radio, we're streaming live there and on YouTube. And after the show, as you know, that's where you can find our content. YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, pretty much wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcasts. The mission of the show, as regular viewers and listeners know, is to offer insights and advice to help people avoid the mistakes of others, right? To learn best practices. Those are the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, to be challenged and hopefully to be inspired by the successes of others. Consultants, coaches, advisors, authors, founders and owners, entrepreneurs, people with expertise. But of course, virtually every successful person that I've ever talked to, at least, has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So as I say every week, while we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while, I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. I've spent the better part of my career equipping businesses to grow, from solopreneurs to small and medium-sized companies, all the way up to the Fortune 50. I've seen some of those companies win, and to varying degrees, I've seen some fail. I've had the opportunity to rub elbows with some of the highest performing people around and with some who probably should have found other professions. In my own businesses, I've had lots of success and failure too. And I like to think I've learned a lot from those experiences. So you're going to hear from me, but mostly you're going to hear from our guests. And today, my guest is Sergiu Simmel, a business growth coach. He guides founders, owners, and CEOs of small to mid-sized businesses and their leadership teams. Here's his bio. Sergiu Simmel is a business growth coach and founder of Get Business Momentum. He guides founders, owners, CEOs of small to mid-sized businesses and their leadership teams on growing their business faster, easier, and I love this, with more joy than they ever thought possible into the AI economy. Sergiu was born and grew up in Bucharest, Romania. He spent his childhood years studying both music and mathematics. In 1981, he defected from communist Romania and ended up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He started his career as a software technologist. Back in graduate school, he has a master's in computer science from University of Minnesota. One of his 2 areas of focus, interestingly enough, was artificial intelligence. Again, think of the year that was likely. Late 80s. In 91, Sergiu co-founded his first startup, a software company that produced an advanced database server. In 1995, he co-founded his second business, providing technology-based compliance services to the financial industry. Before being sold about 2 decades later, the company had grown to a $34 million business. In 1998, he created his own practice, serving as a fractional chief products officer for 7 SaaS companies in a variety of industries. And during that period, he founded his third startup, an e-learning company that pioneered the use of teleseminars for providing educational content. In 2013, Sergiu shifted his focus toward business coaching, becoming the first EOS implementer in New England. And over the past 13 years, he's worked with over 75 businesses ranging in size from 20 to 1,000 people, several of whom ended up executing successful exits. While starting with EOS, over time, Sergiu enhanced and enlarged his toolbox to other business operating systems, including Pinnacle, scaling up 90OS, and as well as adding a wide variety of other bolt-on services from Colby to red teaming to executive coaching to positive intelligence. And as a perspective, Sorry. And as a perpetual learner, he's acquired over 10 such certifications. Since 2024, Sergiu has immersed his work into the rapidly changing world of generative AI, developing and delivering several services aimed at both upskilling business leaders in collaborating with AI, as well as an AI consultant guiding SMBs through their process of transforming themselves into AI forward companies through his partnerships with Humans Plus AI and more recently with WSI, a Toronto based AI consulting and training company. His professional mission, as you heard, is to restore joy in humane performance for entrepreneurial leaders. His passion is to impact people with living meaningful, full expressed lives. He lives in Boston. He's the proud father of 2 grown daughters, and he's madly in love with his 2 grandsons. Sergiu, welcome to Winning Business Radio and TV.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and I really, really appreciate you having me.
Oh, of course, of course. We've known each other for a while. Before we dig in, tell us about your daughters and their families, especially those 2 grandsons that you are madly in love with.
Absolutely. So both my daughters live in the New York area.
Mm-hmm.
They moved there after college. They grew up here in the Boston area, in
Mm-hmm.
Brookline in particular. And and the 2 grandsons are now 10 and 8, and they are my youngest daughter's kids. So as I joke with them, with my daughters, they have a separation of labor or interests. So my eldest daughter is into dogs, and my youngest daughter is into kids, and and they don't overlap.
So you have granddog or granddogs.
Oh, I have right now. Actually, as of about a month ago, I have 2 new grand puppies.
Oh, that's great. We love dogs.
Rescues in particular.
All right. So you grew up in Bucharest, Romania. Tell us about the area. And I can imagine most people listening are not really familiar other than where it is on a map. Tell us about what it was like to grow up there, especially with regard to living under communism in the former Soviet Union.
So, Bucharest was at the time, I'm not sure exactly how large it is right now, about a 2.5 million people city. So, significant city.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up actually in the center of the city, literally. I mean, kind of the equivalent, if people are familiar with Paris, would be like, growing up on Champs-Élysées in Paris, growing up on, I don't know, Fifth Avenue in New York City. And the reason I'm actually bringing up French is that before the Second World War, Bucharest used to be referred to as the Paris of the East, and in part because its architecture was very much inspired. So in fact, if you are familiar with Paris and you go to Bucharest, especially in the parts that have been preserved, you would actually recognize it's almost like you feel that you are in Paris, and to some extent. Now, growing up under the communists, as a kid, I was actually, kind of impervious to that.
Mm-hmm.
I
can imagine.
Yeah, I had a very, very loving pair of parents,
Mm-hmm.
and, both Holocaust survivors. As I started growing up, I realized that that was not quite my place. It was kind of an interesting. So I was in high school actually, and I decided that I have to figure out a way to get out of that. Primarily because of both political. I understanding what that meant, and the constraints of that, as well as some amount of overt anti-Semitism at the time. So it took a long time. I had some family in this country, in the U.S., in Minnesota, as you introduced me. That's why I ended up there. And so it took me about 7 years to get what in the communist countries used to be called an exit visa, and the permission to leave the country as a tourist. And I never returned.
All right. So that was my next question. That was purportedly for a visit, but again, you said you never returned.
Yeah, so that's the defection part. And we knew very well, I'm an only child, and both my parents, everybody knew that what the effects are, and it had impacts. My mother had to retire prematurely, especially because she was actually a journalist. She was a radio host
No kidding.
for 32 years. So I have some of this stuff in my blood, so to speak. And I grew up among radio people, as well as, my dad was, admonished. I mean, there were all kinds of both economic and, and, kind of, political consequences. But, they loved me very much. And essentially their point was they had to see me out, in a place where I could actually prosper. So I spent some time in Rome, Italy, where, all the immigration stuff was going on. So I came to this country as a political refugee, and I joined my family who had left Romania about 15 years prior in Minnesota. And then, I continued I was a student at the time, a computer science student in Bucharest. Never graduated because I left in between 2 years of study and ended up in Minnesota being a graduate student at the University of Minnesota.
Mom and dad stayed there or came here eventually, or?
So mom and dad stayed there, and about 4 years later, I managed to extract them. And also my grandmother, who came to this country at the young age of 87. She lived to be 94.
Wow.
Lived, fun fact, she actually decided to live by herself up all the way to, when she passed away. So, so my parents, found her an apartment, a small apartment, kind of, 5 minutes from their place, so they can be there and taken care of. As she was declining, but she was actually one of those very vital elderly people all the way to the end. So, Kevin, I have some hope genetically on my father's side. Not so much on my mother's side, but on my father's side.
So mine's the opposite. Mine's the opposite. How did you become interested in math and music?
Well, it's kind of interesting story. So on the music side, so my first cousin, who lives in Minnesota now, and who I joined, and so she's 5 years older than I am, and she went to music school and started violin, and then she left. And I, as a little kid, you can imagine at that age, 5-year difference is quite a bit. So I used to follow her and imitate her, and she was my idol, my big sister in a sense, because I was an only child, and she was an only child as well. So after she left, I said to my parents, I was 6 years old. I said to my parents, I have to go to music school. So I spent the next 11 years in parallel to my regular school, going to a music conservatory, and I used to play viola as an instrument. So that was part. And in parallel, my inclinations were towards sciences and math and so forth. So, and I kind of fell in love with the abstraction of math. I happened to be lucky to have very good teachers, and matters a great deal what kind of teachers you have. The quality of the teacher sometimes radically impacts, where you go in life. And then, especially in college, in the university, I ended up in, computer science school at what was called at the time the Polytechnic Institute of Bucharest. And I had two tremendously interesting and capable math teachers. So I absolutely fell in love. And so my mind is kind of in between those two, kind of left brain and right brain. And music stayed with me all my life as a core. And I'm a big, lover of essentially any kind of music that's of quality. So I have a very eclectic taste along those lines.
All right. In grad school, your bio said software technologist, but AI. Now, what year was that? And that to me...
1983.
Okay. So that's way ahead of your time, of its time, AI. What did AI look like then, and how did you find it?
Interestingly enough, so, if you are not technology oriented, people may not know this. And, most, people think that AI is a recent, invention, and was invented, either 3 years ago when ChatGPT came to the market, or maybe 7 years ago or something like this.
Well, I saw
That's
the day the Earth stood still. AI has been around a long time. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
exactly. Well, the fundamentals
Mm.
actually are as older than they're about 50 years old. So I remember in graduate school taking courses on neural networks, for example, actually let's call it a part of computer science that is the basis of the transformer, which is the basis of generative AI today. So those things have been actually studied for literally a very, very long time. Now, of course, at the time and for several decades, the AI didn't have the intersection of three things that made it possible to get to this. So one was basically an advanced way of creating learning, machine learning through neural networks, and then the discovery of the transformer kind of concept at Google and so forth. But that's not the only thing. It's not just technology. The second important thing that had to be in place is, of course, the ability to have very powerful, very fast computing resources.
Right.
So that you can have these enormous data centers and so forth that can compute very well. And there are all kinds of other implications, cooling. And I mean, it's not just chips, but it is chips. And the third part is access to enormous amounts of data so you can train those suckers. And the ability to actually go to the web and access trillions of data elements, both text and now video and audio and so forth and so on, so that you can actually have these things essentially acquire knowledge, if we kind of turn them into anthropomorphic entities, acquire all the world's knowledge and wisdom had to be possible. And those things only came like a perfect storm a few years ago. And that explains why this thing all of a sudden exploded in its capabilities. Yeah. Because those three things finally kind of crossed a certain minimum threshold where they actually can be be turned into what we experience now as chat boxes and now agents and all that good stuff.
All right, we're going to pause right here. We're going to take our first commercial break. We will be right back with Sergiu Simmel.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Bestien Wealth Management is family-owned for 2 generations. They take pride in thoughtful financial planning and wealth management with a family feel for your closely held family business. Bestien Wealth Management focuses on deep planning, integrating your business planning with personal. They will help put your money to work and your mind at ease. Go to bestienwealthmanagement.com for more information. Advisory services offered through Commonwealth Financial Network, a registered investment advisor. Join the Bestien family and let our family advise your family. That's bestienwealthmanagement.com for your complimentary initial consultation.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We are back with Sergiu Simmel. I'm going to say AI technologist, consultant, but also the founder of Get Business Momentum. So you've founded 2 companies, actually three, right? And at least one consulting practice. Where'd you get that entrepreneurial bug?
Uh, Honestly, I don't know. My parents were
Yeah.
the opposite of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, my grandparents were merchants before the Second World War and so forth. So they had, small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents had no, entrepreneurial spirit. So I don't know exactly. Maybe the gene skipped a generation or something like this. But I do have actually one thing, and sometimes in life, somebody says some random thing to you, and they will never remember that they actually said that.
Yes. Yes. I've
And
experienced that.
then that thing actually changes the course of your life.
Mm.
So there was this a friend of mine happened to be actually a theater director who was at the time the artistic director of the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. It's actually a fairly well-known regional, very high-end theater in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to be pretty good friends. And some point in time, he said to me, he was much older than I mean, the guy passed away several years ago. He was kind of my parents' age. And he said to me, you shouldn't be working for somebody else. You should be working for yourself. So that was probably 1985 or so, because I was still in Minneapolis. I moved to Boston in 86.
Mm-hmm.
I probably gestated that sentence for about 6 years, because I started my first business in 1991. And it was one of those crazy moves because, I've been working with a partner who became my business partner for several years on this technology as a side. And, we published some papers and so forth. And at some point in time, we got some attention from Xerox. And they offered to be our own OEM to actually license our technology. So it was my first sale, my first $250,000 sale. And, it was not even done yet. And I decided, this is the time to jump and start something. So I quit my job, and I was working for a startup, actually. I mean, essentially, most of my career, with one exception, before that, I worked for startups,
right?
Software startups, and then we managed to actually close the deal, and I ended up running the company, and my business partner, he was actually more in charge of the technology side.
So I'm going to leave it to listeners and viewers to go check out the rest of your bio on LinkedIn,
Sure.
other companies. But in '98, you started a consulting practice. I just want to point out, Chief Products Officer, and you consulted for 7 SaaS companies. You had a third startup, e-learning using teleseminars was the focus. And then in 2013, you started focusing on business coaching, and you were the first, as your bio said, the first EOS implementer in New England. You've worked with over 75 businesses ranging in size from 20 people to 1,000 people. Tell the audiences what EOS is as an operating system.
So the best way to
operating system. Sorry.
Yeah. So the best way to describe it in a very simple terms is that an operating system is basically those concepts and tools and disciplines that are used to run all aspects of a business.
Mm-hmm.
So another lens to look at a business operating system is to think about all those things in kind of 4 buckets. There is the people bucket, which, by the way, is the hardest part, as we all know in business.
It's called free will.
Exactly. So in fact, I say to business owners, CEOs all the time that, and I challenge them, something that may sound kind of counterintuitive for most people, which is there are no such things as business issues. There are only people issues. And I say to them, bring me a business issue, and I'll sit down and I'll start drilling down to root causes. And I promise you, 100% of the time, not 99, but 100%, will end up of the people issues. Now, there are various kinds of people issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately an issue, but and it, from a different perspective, it's kind of a natural thing. I mean, remember, a business is nothing but a bunch of people's energies that are basically aligned to move the business from here to there, to achieve or to manifest a certain vision of the founder or founders of the business. So the people issues, and then there is the strategy issue. Is that essentially who do we serve? How do we serve? How are we distinct from the rest of the market? I mean, the father of business strategy, I'm paraphrasing here, said once that the strategy is not what you do best, is what you do differently than your competition. That's basically makes your place in the marketplace. Because if you are the same thing, that everybody else, you end up in a commodity market, and that's not a small to medium sized business. So that's the strategy part. And then there is, of course, the third bucket is execution. How do you actually turn all these strategies and ideas and whatever and plans into actual practice? How do you create accountability? How do you make sure that things get done, and not only things get done, but the right things get done at the right time, in the right way, and so forth. And then there is the fourth part. Now, the fourth part, some people call it, the financial part or cash. Viewed from the angle of the founder or founders, it's basically enterprise value. You have to make sure that as the business evolves, you are constantly increasing the value of the business, because otherwise it becomes, what are you doing? It becomes or falls into a different category, which I would call it lifestyle businesses, right? So, but growth businesses have to increase their value. Also eyeing, sometime in the future, an exit or some form of an exit for the founders. So that's basically what the business operating system. Now, the concept has been around for some time. Sort of the grandparent of business operating system is something that used to be called Rockefeller practices. Invented by Vern Harnish, and then it turned to be called rebranded as Scaling Up, and so forth. So EOS, which stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which was the brainchild of a fellow whose name is Gino Wickman, who wrote the fundamental book that describes the system called Traction. And he happened to be, my mentor and tutor, and the guy who actually, taught me how to do that. So what he did is that he took Scaling Up. He was actually a coach for Vern in his company, but what he realized is the Scaling Up was a little bit too complex, too complicated actually, for small, medium-sized businesses to digest and actually implement. So he simplified that radically. I could argue that in some areas he simplified it too much, but that's a different conversation. But in any case, created something that many businesses, I'm talking about now, probably in the order of tens of thousands of businesses, maybe hundreds of thousands
worldwide,
worldwide, have had an ease to adopt because it's simple. Now, I said simple, not easy.
I love that expression. I use it a lot. Simple, not easy. Right.
Absolutely. And you know why, Kevin? And it has straight to do with your main, line of work yourself as a sales trainer and sales trainer and so forth, is because it's all about changing human behavior.
Right.
You teach me, what behavioral change I have to make to actually have a higher likelihood of closing business, right? So I teach and coach and facilitate business leaders, or what kind of behaviors they have to change individually, as well as a team, as well as a whole organization, so that actually they reduce the, let's call it the internal friction, so that the business can actually grow and scale and move forward faster and easier. You quoted me, and with a lot of joy, moving forward. Because ultimately, without that, there is a lot of essentially misalignment, and that usually leads to, at least, in the best case, leaving a lot of growth on the table. In the worst case, leads to ultimate business failure.
All right, we're going to take our second break. We're going to dig into the AI work that you're doing and spend the rest of the show with that. But we're going to take our second break right here. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Bestien Wealth Management is family-owned for 2 generations. They take pride in thoughtful financial planning and wealth management with a family feel for your closely held family business. Bestien Wealth Management focuses on deep planning, integrating your business planning with personal. They will help put your money to work and your mind at ease. Go to bestienwealthmanagement.com for more information. Advisory services offered through Commonwealth Financial Network, a registered investment advisor. Join the Bestien family and let our family advise your family. That's bestienwealthmanagement.com for your complimentary initial consultation.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to YP.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind: to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We are back with Sergiu Simmel, AI expert and founder of Get Business Momentum. Talk about, we're going to dig into AI. Define the term generative AI.
So generative AI is a subset of AI that essentially performs its behaviors or acts, especially as a chat bot like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, by in fact ultimately doing a very simple thing, which is guessing what the next token should be, the next part of a word. So, and people say, wait a minute, what does that have to do? I have rich conversations with this AI thing, and it must know, it has a personality and so forth. Well, all of that stuff is a simulation. It knows what to say next because, 1.7 million people have said the next word the same way.
Yeah.
And that's all there is, folks. There's no magic there. Because, when for people who don't understand this part of the technology, they experience this as magic. Oh my God, it can have feelings. It's telling me, it has empathy to me. Not so fast.
It makes great movies, though.
It can do all kinds of things. But remember, for example, the movie part, if you wish, is basically, there are 2 parts to this. Some of it is AI, in other words, understanding your, and I'm using the word understanding in, quotation marks, guessing actually the meaning of your instructions, otherwise context referred to as a prompt, and then giving all that stuff in a description, or creating a richer description to an engine that actually renders the movie. So it's not the AI part or the generative AI part that actually makes the movie. The movie is generated the same way a human would actually render a movie. My 10-year-old grandson is now an expert in putting together little videos for themselves, not with AI, but by literally using his mom's iPhone and taking small videos and connecting themselves and so forth, and putting some background music and so forth. So doing that work, because my grandson has the instructions in his head.
Right.
In this particular case, the instructions come and are interpreted and enlarged by the generative AI.
All right. So now let's get to business, right? AI is transforming business. It's either people are on board or they're left behind at this point. What does it look like, though, to transform a business using AI?
So it's a very interesting topic. And of course, first disclaimer, it's evolving by the, minute.
Yes.
If you at least, maybe by the week or by the month. And what I'm saying now may not be valid in September of this year.
Yeah. As a reminder, it's April 13th, 26. Go ahead.
Exactly. So, for a business to actually, turn itself into what I would call an AI forward business, it needs to actually think of AI. And when I say it, I mean, of course, starting with the leaders of the business and starting with the CEO and going, to the rest of the organization. It needs to think of AI as basically being an infrastructure. And this is the metaphor that I sometimes use to explain to these two people is that think of electricity. At this stage, we don't think of running a business on electricity. I mean, it's duh. I mean, you and I are speaking through a screen right now in this very moment, and my computer and your computer are all plugged into the wall, and there's electricity there, right? And so forth and so on. But in 1905, if you actually ask the manufacturer of God knows what, in northern Massachusetts, since we both live in Massachusetts, in, let's say, Lowell, in one of those mills.
Textiles, hats, shoes, whatever, clothing.
Exactly.
Right.
So that they had basically a steam engine that was moving the machinery, and all of a sudden somebody says, well, this electrical thing is going to be better and better and so forth. So, they will make a generator that in the basement of that factory, that would probably be running on, kerosene or some other, fuel that would generate electricity that will feed, and there will be this discussion. Oh my God, we have this particular thing that's moved by electricity and so forth. Well, right now, if you go into a factory and you say, are you guys running on electricity? It would be a totally an idiotic question to ask. Well, it's the same thing with AI, with one exception, that it took about 20, 30 years for electricity to become common in, say, manufacturing. Well, it's taking basically 2 years for this whole thing to transform their whole business world. And here's why, in my humble opinion, because it actually its impact is to transform the way we do work fundamentally. So let me explain for a second what I mean by that at the individual level. You and I have been implicitly trained since we were 2 years old, since we were verbal, that basically when we have a problem in front of us, the implicit question that pops into our heads is, how do I solve that problem? It's very simple. I mean, it's like trivial, right? So in this AI based world, that question has to be changed. And the question that has to be asked instead is, how do I get AI to help me solve the problem? Now, for most people are going to say, well, that's trivial. And to refer to your comment earlier, Kevin, it's easy. I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy, because it's so ingrained in the way we do work that we immediately start using our brain to figure out a solution. And I've been immersed in this work for the last 3 years, and I constantly catch myself starting to do something and then say, wait a minute, why am I doing this? I haven't asked AI how to do this first. So to get me from 0 to, say, I don't know, 70%, 80%, 90%, and then I complete the rest of it. But I can do it much faster and probably better quality, right? So from a business perspective, we need to start thinking about all the way businesses function, and that as you can imagine, brings me back to business operating systems. But we have to reimagine. That's the opportunity to reimagine how we actually run this business, how we operate in all its functions, so that we can actually, the way I put it, augment people's work with AI. And and that requires that we have to, explicitly discover and express the workflows step by step, which is something that most people don't do. You and I do.
We just do it.
We just do it. We don't think about, okay, I'm going to take step one and step. It never. Well, when we want to actually create let's say an agent these days to lift ourselves so that we can be the person the human in the loop, but not the executioner of that, we have to start imagining, okay, so what's my first step? What's my second step? What's my third step? And then they say, let's say a workflow is 12 steps, right? Well, maybe steps 3 to 7 are actually augmented by AI, and 8 to 10 are actually totally delegated to AI, and then the human does just step 1 and step 11 and 12. That's something that requires a certain kind of intentionality at all levels, at every single job, or the way to use EOS terminology, for example, seat in the org chart, in the accountability chart.
So I've seen, and I'm sure many have seen, all kinds of videos and read articles, whatever. Most people are using AI like it's Google as a search engine, right? Yeah. Our experience is either related to that, or it's related to calling a large company and getting, a bot on the phone. It's going to do a whole lot more than that. It can really automate any process.
Absolutely.
I mean, short of, well, no, I guess I will say any process, because it can control machines. I was thinking back to our textile example, but it could run a machine if we tell it the steps to running a machine.
Absolutely. And even more so, since I talk to business leaders primarily, CEOs, founders, and so forth, people don't realize that this is not just for the front-end workers to get them more productive.
Yeah.
This includes the CEO, because the CEO, for example, she may actually use only 12% or a small percentage of her time or his time doing the creative work, the strategic work that will get the business from here to there, because it's using a lot of other time doing the mechanical stuff that AI can do it much faster and literally better.
Even creatively,
because it has access to the whole world of wisdom. Now, there are 3 things, by the way, and I'm going to go very fast through them.
Oh, go ahead.
There are 3 things that humans need to retain, and this is actually my approach to when I teach this stuff, when I coach this stuff to business leaders, is that you have to keep the humans in the loop, which is why I object to this AI first approach. That's why I call it AI forward.
Okay.
Because so there are three things. First of all, it's the human is the provider of context. You see, AI can be trained either generally or specifically for your business, even if you develop your own thing, only on matters that have been captured in some form materially, text, video, audio, etc., etc. AI doesn't read minds. AI doesn't know all the stories that Kevin has acquired over his 30, 40 years of experience of teaching sales methodologies to people. AI has, now he may have written a book about it, and so AI can be trained on what's in that book.
Right.
But that only captures only a certain number of things. So when you look at a single business, there's a lot of stuff that's part of that business that's only in people's brains, minds. Let's call that context. That's the context that only humans can provide, and they need to provide to AI for it to actually produce a high quality response. So that's number one. Number two is that humans remain responsible or accountable for the validity of what AI does. So it's not permitted, in my humble opinion again, for anybody, you kind of mentioned earlier, for anybody to say, AI hallucinated, or AI gave me the wrong answer. The same way, by the way, a leader of the team, if one of the team members screws something up, the leader of the team has to absorb that accountability. It's the leader of the team to be accountable for whatever the team produces. The leader of the team cannot say, it's not my fault. It's, employee ABC's fault. So that's, not permissible with humans, and definitely not permissible with AI. So that's number two. We need to retain that accountability, and we have to actually verify. And there are ways to actually use AI to help us do that faster. But ultimately, to use a quote from a totally different world, the buck stops at the human. Is the third thing, which is judgment. At the end of the day, it's only humans who can say this is good and this is bad. And they should be the only entity in this whole game that have to retain that responsibility. And this particular part, by the way, has huge implications on policy, on government regulations, all this stuff. But it also has implications locally in the side of a business, and how a leader needs to think about how we deploy AI inside of a business.
Yeah, this is only my opinion, and we could spend 2 hours on this next subject. We have to wrap up in just a minute, but the government, Congress, is not going to regulate AI. It's going to take too long. It's going to be irrelevant by the time they get around to it. It's got to be more local governance, whatever that's going to look like, right? My last question is this to you, though. I've actually got two last questions. Quick comment. When my kids were learning to tell the time, we wouldn't give them digital watches because they couldn't read an analog. Their friends couldn't read analog clocks or watches. So once they proved to us they could read an analog clock, we gave them the digital. What are we losing over time if AI is doing all this stuff for us?
Actually, if we don't approach AI the right way, we may be losing essentially humans' abilities to do these three things that I'm talking about.
That judgment mostly.
Right.
Right.
But we can use AI to enhance exactly that. But that requires a certain kind of approach, which I would call a human-centric approach to it.
Excellent. Good answer. Last question. Who in the viewing and listening audiences should reach out to you and why?
Well, if businesses want, or business leaders, I should say, they think that, I have to do something about AI in my business, but I have no idea where to start from. And I've heard that, I can do this use case and so forth, but I'm not sure whether that's the right thing. I can help them. That's basically what I guide businesses on growing into the AI economy, as I call. And how to reach out to me? Well, there are several ways. First of all, I have a LinkedIn presence, like all humans have these days, or professionals have these days. So, you see my name. It's pretty unique. So then just go to LinkedIn and search for my name, and I guarantee you that you will never find a second person with that name. So that's what. Or you can go to email me at sss@getbusinessmomentum.com. In one word, getbusinessmomentum.com. And the first part is SSS, which happened to be my 3 initials.
Perfect. Well, listen, thank you so much for carving out some time and for being here. This is fascinating to me. I'm sure it's interesting to the audience. I'd like to get you back at some point and talk more.
Absolutely. Anytime, Kevin.
Sounds good. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. This is a show about business and business challenges. If you've got concerns about the sales effectiveness of your company, whether your sales team is you or small or large, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn at Winning Business Radio. You can drop me a note at kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Our company is Winning Incorporated. We are part of Sandler Training. We develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. We're not a fit for everybody, but hey, maybe we should have a conversation. Thank you to producer and engineer Juan for another job well done. Thanks, Juano. Be sure to join us next week, Monday, April 20th. We'll do it all again. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You have been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.